welcome to Hotspot, presented by University Television Productions. I'm your host, Jamie Bingham, and today we're talking about the different stances on gun regulation in the United States. It's our Second Amendment for the right to bear arms. However, due to some recent shootings in San Bernardino, California, and Colorado Springs, Colorado, there's been a question brought up of should these gun laws in our society be revised. I'm joined today by 4 Boise State students to come in and bring their opinion a little bit on the matter. So let's meet our guests.
Perfect. I'm Brittany Locke, and I am a junior here.
Hi, I'm Mike Tetra. I'm a senior here.
I'm John Parks. I'm a senior.
My name is Tom Cressy, and I'm an international exchange student from Australia.
Great, guys. Thanks for joining me today.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, sure. So let's just start off by everyone going around and telling us a little bit about your personal opinion on the matter of gun laws.
Okay. Well, to start off, I think that some things should be revised, although a complete elimination of weapons would be the wrong move for the United States.
Very well said. I'm a big advocate of carrying weapons myself. I've own a few handguns, and I think owning guns is a right as an American citizen that we have, the right to protect ourselves.
I actually agree with you. I'm pretty big, I'm an avid hunter. I own firearms, and I'm pro Second Amendment.
Cool. I mean, it's interesting how you bring up the Second Amendment. Interesting how you said recent shootings. There's been 300 this year. Like, a lot of people have died, and I think there needs to be serious gun control. I think we need to, the United States needs to remove assault weapons from the hands of citizens, and many other types of weapons as well.
All right.
Yeah, so would you like to tell us a little bit about how gun laws are in Australia?
Yeah, of course. So in 1996, we had we used to have quite open gun laws. So you could get assault weapons and all sorts of weapons in Australia until about 1996, when we had a very large mass shooting. About 32 people died. And from that point onwards, the government basically brought in what America would call quite strict gun control laws. So the total assault weapons ban, a large-scale ban on most semi-automatic weapons, very extensive background checking. I mean, if you want to get a firearm in Australia, it's costly, it's a long process. But I mean, the proof is in the pudding. I mean, since 1996, we haven't had one single mass shooting since those gun laws brought in. So I mean, Australia now, is, I believe, a really good example of how gun control can actually work to save lives.
I think we could go off that. When they did ban all weapons, you could say your crime went up. No?
No, I've heard that argument before, and it's an interesting argument. The funny thing is, if you look at crime in any situation, crime has hot spots, hot times, that kind of thing. You've heard of that. So the funny thing is, when they banned crime, it was actually during the winter. And then crime increased, and people said, now that we've banned guns, it's actually caused an increase in crime. No, crime generally happens and there's an increase during summer or hot times. So essentially, after they banned guns, summer then hit, and there's a usual increase in crime around the summertime, and that caused the increase. So I think you taking that that spurious example there.
Spurious. I think the facts speak for itself.
No, because you have to look at all the variables.
96 though is when you guys outlawed weapons, correct?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, and looking 97, 98, 99, you guys had an increase of armed robberies in major cities rise 10%.
Okay, let's just. Obviously, I'll argue that point because I don't believe it's correct. But let's just say there was an increase in armed robberies, but there was a decrease in violent mass shootings. There was also a decrease in the number of suicides by guns and the number of murders by guns. So yes, a few people were robbed, and that's a terrible crime. But if we're going to really weigh up what's important in our society, is it the fact that somebody can walk into a school and machine gun 20 children, or someone might take $40 from a corner store? Okay. Yeah.
Any response to that?
Well, what I think is interesting, and something that you've actually mentioned before in a previous class, is the fact that Australia typically backs up the United States in wars. Yeah. The recent shooting in Paris by ISIS terrorists was done in Paris because they had supported us in recent explorations of different territories. So does that make you concerned at all that there's not going to be anyone to protect themselves if ISIS was to go in and try to eliminate some of the Australians?
No, it's a good argument. It's an interesting argument, Brittany. A lot of people bring it up, this idea that, well, if they had guns, they'd be able to protect themselves.
Right.
Okay, I can see where that's coming from. However, these are fanatical terrorists. This wasn't, a person with a mental illness or a person who's, obviously, something is obviously mentally wrong with that individual being able to buy a gun legally and then just kill anyone they want. This is, we're not going to be able to stop terror. ever.
Right.
But let's take your point about, somebody would be able to defend themselves. So actually, I was actually lucky enough to do a criminal justice course about policing in this country, and they say when police fire their weapons, against a suspect target, etc., 70 to 80% of their shots miss. So that is a trained individual that has gone through firearms training, has passed psychological and other metric testing to be a police officer, and they miss 3/4 of the time. So then you're saying that a random individual who has been able to get a firearm license, and it's quite easy to get a concealed carry permit or a firearms license in the United States, with no kind of not the same level of training, or even who is this person, can then defend against a terrorist. I mean, you've got to have serious nerves of steel. And I have great respect for the law enforcement in this country and in France who had to go in and fight these individuals. But I don't think the same can be said that, oh wow, if he just had a gun, he'd be able to shoot the terrorist back. Not at all. You'd have some sort of horrible situation of crossfire. They'd probably be shot by the police who turn up anyway. I mean, I think it's a real facile argument to say that, he'd just be able to defend himself if he had a gun.
But if the chances are swayed, at least even slightly in the way of public defense, that would be absolutely fantastic if someone could take someone out just initially without. And of course there is going to be that kind of conflict if a law enforcement officer or maybe even someone else that is wanting to do a good deed comes in and it's just you see someone with a gun, you're going to automatically think you're a target. But the person that is pursuing a potential shooter is going to, I think, have already made that sacrifice in their mind. Wouldn't you think so, Tom? That they know that they are risking potential death because they are pursuing that.
I think that kind of, I can see where you're coming from. But that kind of argument, I believe, is the ultimate kind of gun lover's fantasy, that they're going to be some sort of Walker, Texas Ranger to come in and save the day. When really what would happen, they would wet their pants and then they would shoot some innocent person. You know how confusing and complex and horrible those situations are? And the reason we give police weapons and give police, kind of training that they do have is because we know that they need that to handle those situations. Whereas an individual who has to attend like an 8-hour class and fire 50 rounds.
Right.
I mean, that's not right.
So to build off of that, I think one of the reasons and one of the key reasons that I believe that guns should be legal in the United States and readily accessible. Not immediately. I believe there should be a cool down period, but the Second Amendment was put in place to protect ourselves from tyranny. So you're talking about law enforcement officials that have incredible training on how to use a weapon, and government officials that are going to be able to combat, if people start to rise up against them. Don't you think that the general public should be able to protect themselves from that kind of tyranny if something like that were to break out?
Well,
or heaven forbid an apocalypse. I know I'm being a little bit of a conspiracy theorist. I don't want to say I picture zombies running around, but I think that it's something that is, you want to be able to protect yourselves from that, right?
Well, no, because your argument totally exists in the hypothetical. The Second Amendment, in the first line of the Second Amendment, I can't read it off the top of my head, it says you have the right to have a well-regulated militia. Well-regulated and a militia. I don't think the forefathers actually thought we're going to have everyone armed all the time just in case one day the federal government turns tyrannical. I really think the reason they wanted a well-regulated militia is that the forefathers didn't want a strong federal army, which now the United States has. So, foreign invasion, is well off if that's ever going to occur.
Yeah.
And they really just wanted to have, the protection against federal government with, states' rights. I don't believe that. I believe that's more something like a National Guard or a state standing army to help in times of emergency, not everyone having a gun. Let's just say your government does turn tyrannical and you have your AR-15 or your 308 or whatever you have, you've got bigger things to deal with, like the fact the enemy or the United States government will have drones and tanks and all sorts of things. So I don't think, if the government was going to turn tyrannical, I don't think in the back of their head they're like, well, we're not going to turn tyrannical because everyone's going to have guns. No, you're supposed to have a good, open, transparent, democratic system with a fantastic fourth estate, which is the media in this country, which it is quite critical of the government, and that protects against tyranny, not individuals having firearms.
So let's take this question and run a little bit in a different direction. Are you pro-guns on Boise State campus?
I am.
I do have a concealed carry permit, and I know with some certain points of Boise State you cannot carry in certain classrooms, but it is an open public campus. Having that protection, and I have gone through training more than just a regular, I would say the 50 rounds, or like the course, and just having something to kind of protect myself means a lot. I mean, with these increasing, like these terrorists, like ISIS, that what happened in Paris, what has happened at certain colleges, the one that just happened in Oregon, having something on you, I think is good, and there's a time and place for it in certain college campuses, but I do think you can be able to open carry on colleges.
John?
So I am pro-gun, but I don't think students should be allowed to have firearms on campus, if that makes sense. You're like, yes, like armed security guards, yes, but I think students have no reason to have a gun on campus.
I mean, I think you know my opinion. Obviously. I don't think you should be able to have a gun. I mean, guns should be in the hands of trained professionals, not some 19-year-old jumped up kid.
Yeah, so some of the stuff that we were talking about with the Oregon Community College is that one of the men who was on the train in Paris that stopped the terrorist on that, he actually was quoted saying that if he had been at that college and he had a gun on him, then he would have been able to stop something. But given that, he also has been trained in the military. So is it fair for students who have only gone through 8 hours of training to actually have a concealed weapon on them?
Well, I think that training is going to be, of course, one factor, but there's also going to be a lot of other factors that come into play when it comes to someone actually being eligible to have a gun. And I think it's really important that not only are you trained, but you also meet the criteria in order to get a weapon. And I honestly believe in guns, but I don't think that it's tight enough right now. Right now in the United States, all you need is a background check taken. Okay, you can have 3 days that they provide the dealer to have do a background check, and if that's not done, then they just give the weapon, right? Is that right?
It varies by state. Like in Idaho, you can go to the store, fill out the background check, and once that clears from like the ATF, you could actually walk out with this gun that day. But other stores like California, you actually have a 10-day cooling period.
Right. 10-day. And according to the FBI, I read this somewhere, I can't remember, but it's actually about 25 days is what is required to have a really good background check. So do you think that something like that would be more beneficial for the people that are kind of, mentally unstable to actually know whether or not they should acquire a weapon?
Going off the laws now, I really think that if they can't enforce current laws in place, what gives them the right to add additional laws to it?
Do you mean where they're acquiring weapons without that 3-day period?
I mean, even with that 3-day cooling period, like right now, if you enforce more laws saying like anti-gun, like people can't have guns, that's just harming the citizens that follow the law.
But they could, I mean, if they're following the law, they probably don't need a gun right that second, or what do you think?
I mean, the cooling off period doesn't have an effect on me. Like working for a store that actually sells firearms, I know what the process is. Like you have to fill out the online questionnaire, fill out paperwork, and that actually goes to the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, their database, and it goes through everything there. And if there's any red flags, like whatsoever, they'll ding it, and they won't let that person buy the gun.
I was going to say, I think on this subject, maybe the question is, well, let me kind of back it up. Certain individuals will buy guns, that want guns. I know many people that don't care to own a firearm, and because for that same reason, Tom, they don't want to be put in that position where they have to use it because I don't think they could, and they know that. I think people do make that decision, and normally the good guys, I mean the good guys that want to protect, they go out there and they work to get that concealed license and they try to do it. People that you don't need to get a license are concealed to carry a gun illegally. I mean, people will do it if they're going to do it. It's easy to get a gun anyway. So, I mean, I've been stopped by cops before, like when I get pulled over, and I have to show my concealed. And I'm usually carrying with me, I have it right in my, right below my steering wheel. And the cops are usually pretty cool about it. They're like, where do you put it? We like to know for trainings when we stop other individuals. And they always thank me, like, thanks for being a good citizen. Thanks for, owning a firearm. And it's kind of this more positive outlook. And I wouldn't carry one unless I knew I could draw, and I've had background training, but certain people shouldn't, and so that kind of goes back to like carrying on campus. I haven't done it as much because I felt safer, but when the news pops up in media, of course, people might go out and you see these drives of people buying ammo and then buying new guns, and it's good for the market, but I mean, to me, it really comes down to like a personal, decision. And I think really people do know whether they want to carry or not or own a gun.
And I think going up, like concealed carry permit, there's two types. There's the basic, and then the one which actually allows you to carry on college campus, the enhanced. And the enhanced is a lot more. You have to go through more training, do more things in order to get it. It's not like they're just handing out concealed carries to any average Joe.
Right, you have to go through. Well, the way I think about it, and someone put this in really good terms for me, is kind of going back to like, people that want to inflict terror that are from this country and that aren't from this country. Like the people that are coming here, and it tends to be, kind of a trend that people want to come to this country and terrorize us. And I think about the people that are going to come here and actually like move next door to my sister, or like come on this campus when I don't know that I would be the person that would be able to jump and shoot an active shooter, but if I had a chance of like someone being able to jump out and protect my sister, like that would just be amazing for me. And I've even had, I've talked to a police officer about this, and he said if there is any chance to, have one more person survive, then I'm willing to take the chance of, whether or not someone is gonna shoot him the first time, or like might accidentally produce another casualty. Like if someone can just go on a rampage and then the cops can't come fast enough, then
kind of going off
that's
what
so
Michael
severe.
said, like people, it's easy. If someone wants to get a gun, they'll go and get it.
I feel like you're all trying to convince me.
No,
I'm not going to. Let me take some
No.
issues with a few of your arguments.
Sure.
Firstly, with yours, Brittany, people come to this country to terrorize us. That doesn't generally happen. There's nothing to support that. Since 2001, there's been about 750,000 refugees to come to the United States. 3 have been found wanting to commit terrorist acts. 3. Generally, most of the terror that's committed in this country is committed by white men who generally have anarchist or libertarian views, and Christians. So it isn't this idea about Islamic terror and all that, and terror.
So-
Obviously, we'll stay away from that, but that kind of terror, that's not an argument.
To be fair,
your other
though,
argument.
The San Bernardino shooting was...
Yeah, of course, that was a
Those
genuine
two.
terrorist act. I would say that all these mass shootings are genuine terrorist acts by
Right.
the FBI definition. Just the fact that it was Muslim, they were Islamic, might have had ties to ISIS or whatever. Everyone jumped on it. The media does that. With your arguments in terms of, I'm a responsible person. I should be able to have it because I'm responsible. Yeah, of course. But I guess there's sometimes, for example, we have to all take our shoes off when we go to the airport because one guy, one time, tried to blow up the plane because he had a bomb in his shoes. And now they took that step. Or like every single bridge in like this state has those kind of guards against it because one time some, terrible person decided to throw a rock at the car. And they took that kind of, let's be careful in the future. Let's make steps towards saving lives. Yet 10,000 people every year die of gun violence. And all of a sudden it's like, they weren't responsible. Maybe they had mental illness or something like that. Totally deflected from the real issue. And I'm not going to say that when someone goes on a shooting that the gun is the only issue. There's plenty of issues here. But I'm just saying it's a very important variable, a very important piece of what goes on that needs to be changed. And some people, like in Australia, people do have guns. If you like pistol shooting, if you like hunting, if you're a farmer, you can have a firearm. It's not like nobody can have it anymore. But it's ultra stringent. And we're not going to allow, I don't see the point of an individual in a society having a weapon that can shred enemy soldiers. I don't see the point of that. But if you want to hunt ducks and have a shotgun, fine. You say, somebody might be able to stop a shooting or something like that. About 3% of shootings are ever stopped by an individual outside the police, or they turn a gun on themselves and stuff like that. And most of them are actually people who are unarmed. So, I'm saying that if we want to really, help people and give people a fighting chance, we seem to be going down this alley, to give people a fighting chance, we'll give everyone guns. Well, why not to give people a fighting chance? Let's take away the guns that really are able to cause mass damage in a very short period of time.
Well, you make it sound easy, though. It's...
So going off, you're saying they should essentially outlaw guns.
I'm saying they should I'm saying if they should,
But look at the history of America, gun-free zones. Chicago, you're not allowed to have a handgun inside city limits, and they have the highest homicide by handgun rate in America.
Okay.
Yeah, hold on.
Okay.
San Bernardino, that's a gun-free zone. The guns they weren't allowed to have. No one is allowed to have there, and yet they still managed to get their hands on it. Colorado, Fort Hood, you look at all these places where these shootings guns aren't supposed to be there. So all that says is even though they could say, you can't have guns, guns aren't allowed to be there, people will still find a way to get their hands on those guns and still go and do a shooting.
Yeah, of course they will. I mean, there will always be crime in the United States with such a huge, I mean, I think last stat I saw that out of all the privately owned firearms in the world, like 50% of them in the United States. I'm not saying that when you ban guns, all crime will stop, all guns will stop. But the idea that, well, if we can't stop all crime, we shouldn't even bother. I think that's, I mean, if you want to get crack cocaine, you can get it anywhere in America, can't you? But should we not make it illegal because you can still do it? No, of course not. It should be illegal. We should have laws in place to protect against people. That's basically, I mean, if we have laws that's like this, it's basically the state saying that we do not sanction this. This is not okay. We will do our duty as the government and protect the welfare of citizens when so many people are dying. And yeah, of course there will always be crime. That's life. Unfortunately, that's the society we live in.
They should impose stricter laws to prevent things like this from happening.
Of course.
But they already have strict laws on it. Am I wrong? They are, like California, there's a limit on the amount of rounds a gun can hold. Yeah. Chicago, you're not allowed to have firearms in there. Around military bases, you're not allowed to have firearms.
Yeah,
but where all these shootings are happening, people are still getting these firearms.
Yeah.
So why sit there and penalize the people who do follow the law, like every day, the average Joe who follows all the laws, when they're not the ones who are doing anything wrong?
Because unfortunately, sometimes when you need to bring in legislation to make hard decisions in the government, of course you will penalise everyone.
So you're going to penalise everyone?
Yes, that's what you have to do.
And make everyone suffer?
Yeah, make everyone suffer. I don't have my gun, so I'm suffering. Jesus. I mean, grow up. I mean, I think the only argument I can see that people really have for wanting guns is, I like guns, they're fun. I mean, like, guns are fun. Don't get me wrong, I fire guns. Guns are fun. But I understand that if I'm going to make a decision as a citizen to say, look, I don't think anyone should be able to get, you know, kind of Uzis and all sorts of like high capacity automatic weapons. That should be right. And I mean, I take your argument that say, you know, well, there's still crime that occurs in Chicago and California and stuff like that.
I think Chicago is the prime.
Yeah, of course, but there's many other, I mean, when you talk about crime in general, I mean, crime isn't caused by guns. Crime is caused by a myriad of other issues.
Well, I mean, breaking, gun is just a tool. It is the person behind the gun who kills people. A gun does not kill anyone.
Yeah, but you're not going to give someone a really, really, really good tool to be able to kill someone, are you?
All I'm saying is, I mean, you could put a gun...
Yeah, I know what your argument's going to be. Well, guns don't kill people.
No, it's the
kill people.
And there is background checks.
But they use guns. That's the problem.
Okay, but...
That's like... Oh, my mic, sorry.
That is like the lady who went to McDonald's, bought a hot coffee, spilled it on herself, and then sued McDonald's for giving her hot coffee.
That's the insanity of your civil justice system. That's not like...
But no, what you're doing is you're blaming firearms for what people do. Essentially, that's been your argument.
Of course.
Okay,
because, but... No. Okay.
But like maybe it's not so much that he's saying that we should ban all guns. Maybe there should just be stricter legislation on what kind of guns are allowed for the public to use.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. I mean, don't get me wrong, I don't think you'll be able to ban guns in the United States full stop. I mean, and the sad thing is, I mean, you talk about... Yeah, all right. It depends how you interpret it, like anything in the Constitution. Anyway, but, I mean, you can't say... I've lost my point, sorry.
Well, you know, I was going to say, so it sounds like, though, and John brought up a good point, you know, how California has its own set of laws. Idaho has a complete open law. I mean, anyone can get a gun here. It's crazy.
Well, not anyone. They still have to go through the background check.
But it's a lot. There's not as much restrictions. You know, we don't have a mag capacity limit on our guns. You know, Chicago has like you said, a no.
They've banned
it completely. So maybe the point is here, instead of it being state-run, like how like marijuana now is like state kind of in certain states aren't. It should be a federal. Open ban. I think that's something that might be maybe a better tactic and might solve kind of what's happening, because you have people like you're traveling back to Christmas. You can't carry your handgun down there because it's
I can't bring any guns.
Yeah, you can't bring any guns because they're over mag capacity. And that is something.
I agree with that.
Yeah, that is something I think maybe a solution to it is, it just sounds like after hearing you guys go at it, something more of a federal level.
See, I don't necessarily believe that the federal government should have charge. I believe definitely that states should have more of a say in the laws that are...
But then you'll run into the same issue, like if you're crossing borders, let's say we don't allow anything but 22s here, like rifles or something, and then someone
you just don't, you just don't bring them then.
See, I mean, so you have that kind of that fear of the federal government and stuff like that. Because the federal government, government's job is to do this kind of stuff, to protect the mass of citizens. I mean, in Australia, I mean, we have states, absolutely, but the state governments don't nearly have have the amount of kind of power that they do in the United States. And I think that's really important because, I mean, if you are one United States of America, you should have an overarching system to control these kind of serious issues that are killing thousands of people.
Right, and we do, but what's different from Australia, that is the United States, is the fact that we are a republic, not a democracy. So we put a lot of, what was that?
You're a democratic republic, yeah.
Yeah, so we put a lot more power in the power of like one individual rather than just the overlying masses. So I think that's something really important to consider, that we do have it broken up how we do, is because the individual, the minority, is also really important here in the United States.
So also bringing up the point about different states, wouldn't it be different from California to Idaho because of the hunting laws as well? I'm from Alaska. We have a lot of guns up there as well. And of course, that has to be different from California, where there's a large population of people versus, again, in LA, maybe different than here in Idaho. What do you think about that?
I mean, it's always hard to put the one-size-fits-all. Especially, I mean, the United States is really kind of unique in the fact that, I mean, in Australia it's not as nearly as the same, but I mean, if you go to Idaho and then you go down to like Florida,
the United States is polarized.
Yeah,
it's
so
it is, and I think that's what's causing a lot of tension throughout, and like the distrust of our neighbor, basically, is the fact that we have, especially right now, presidential candidates that want to separate us rather than bring us together.
The United States have never been this polarized since the Civil War.
Absolutely, and right after the Civil War, when people finally like came back together, we went and what did we do? Like massacre a bunch of people in the Philippines? Like that's the last thing that I want to see happen, is that. But I mean, I think that the president definitely should be kind of the face of the people rather than like targeting, you know, a certain side of the spectrum. I think that's really sad.
Yeah, so we're going to have to start wrapping up now. Is there any final comments from anybody?
Well, I'm just glad I got to talk to you guys.
Let me take a serious point. I mean, if you have the entire population of Europe, it's what, double the United States and Australia, and they have 1/10 the gun deaths of the United States. So you either have to take the fact that the citizens of the United States are either crazy homicidal maniacs, or maybe they shouldn't have high-capacity firearms.
Well, in the United Kingdom, even now, you have to, I mean, there's even been like a ban of doctors that have wanted to like remove like any sharp objects, even from like kitchen knives. So I think that's a little extreme too.
Okay, guys, so that concludes our show for today. We'd like to thank our guests for joining us. An awesome discussion.
Thank you for having us.
Guys, so I'm Jamie Bingham, and in behalf of everyone here at University Television Productions, thank you for watching.
Oh, thank you.